You're listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paweta, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Welcome to the next episode of Ideas and Leaders podcast. Today, I have a great guest. Nida is a top-tier business consultant. She's a mindset coach. She's a former Fortune 500 executive, and she has more than 2 decades of experience in marketing and business. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion about how we can bring our businesses to the next level. Hi, Nida. It's great to have you on Ideas and Leaders.
Hi, Elena. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so Nida, if you can share a little bit in the beginning about yourself, how did you get to where you are right now? What is your business story?
Yeah, well, it's quite a long story. After I finished my master's degree in business, I started in the corporate world. I worked for companies like L'Oreal, Unilever, cosmetics, makeup brands, and managing these brands, being a brand manager, product manager, working in marketing. And, it sounds like a dream job for any girl, right? But after a few months, I got bored with every single job, even though friends and the culture and everything was great. But I think in hindsight, I realized that working in corporate world was not for me because I like to invent things. My number one strength is ideation. So I like to create solutions. And the more complex the problem, the better. So I love working with complex problems and analyzing things, and being innovative requires you to be kind of rebellious as well. So breaking the rules, not like the laws, but just breaking rules and challenging social norms and beliefs that people have, which might not be true, right? So that's a requirement for being disruptive and innovative. And that's me. It's in my personality type. I've just always been like that. And so after a few years, I left corporate world and I started a child development center. So I worked with kids and parents and helping, obviously being like a consultant to parents so that they know how to raise their kids so that they're resilient and have high EQ and self-esteem. And we're really having the end in mind in parenting, like what type of kid do you want to raise? Like what future adult do you want to create? That starts now. It doesn't start like 10 years, 20 years from now. It starts now. And so after many years, I transitioned from, working. That's the point where I realized that I love psychology. I'm really obsessed with understanding the human mind and, why do people do the things that they do? And so I transitioned into coaching adults. And as we know, we are who we are because a lot of it has to do with our childhood and how we grew up. So it's kind of like the same thing, but I work with adults now, and I work with entrepreneurs and CEOs, and I help them on 2 things. First, on the one side is the business strategy. So it's a lot about differentiating your business and your brand and creating a solution that no one else is even thinking about or doing. So it's about how do you build a culture of innovation in your business and create a solution or an offer that stands out, but not just standing out for the sake of standing out, but to solve a problem that no one can solve or is not solving as good as it should be. And the other side is the psychology side. So I work with people on reinventing their self-identity. And it does not mean you're going to change yourself, but it just means you're evolving to be the next level of yourself, getting closer to being the person that you're truly proud of, like who you really want to be. And that is required if you want to elevate your business. You need to elevate your self-identity. And so what I do is kind of like psychology meets business. So it's 2 things. And surprisingly, people think that when clients come to me, they think that they're talking about business, but I would say 60, 70%, they're talking about, their personal issues, their family, relationships, self-confidence, self-esteem, what they're fearful of, and all these things. And it's for everyone, even like high performers, even exceptional people. It happens with everyone, right? So yeah, that's what I currently do. And yeah.
Wow, it is so interesting that you get to connect your passion to psychology, working with people, with the business side. And indeed, it is so important, on Ideas and Leaders. I have guests speaking about leadership, about business strategies, marketing, and every time we come back to the issue of self-leadership. How do we manage ourselves? How do we manage our personal goals? What do we really want in life? And it is so interesting that from those big business topics, we always come back to ourselves. So it is really great that you're doing this, and I would love to learn more about your methodology. So actually, our listeners are very often entrepreneurs who have certain issues with their businesses, or with leaders who have issues with their teams, and they're looking for advice. So when a client comes to you and they have some issue, they want to bring their business to the next level, for example, so where do you start, and what is your methodology? How do you work with them?
Yeah, it's like I mentioned, it's two things. So, but usually the starting point, if they come to me because of the business, usually it's because they've hit a plateau or they've realized that there's some sort of problem, right? And it's so easy to happen to all of us, because when things look good, when we're successful, when the sales is coming in, you don't realize that there's a problem. There's always a problem. And it's kind of human nature. We don't want to look at the leaking pipes in the basement. We just want to look at the glamorous things in our business, right? And that's true whether life or business or relationships or anything. But what I say is actually the best time to be fixing things and working on the tough things in your business or in your life or in yourself is when you're strong, is when you have the resources, not when you've hit rock bottom. But funny enough, that's where usually we start to realize that there's a problem, is when we hit rock bottom, or there's a plateau in your business, or you realize you're not growing anymore, or all your clients have, something's happening, they're not renewing the contracts or something like that. So my starting point is we will kind of like dissect the whole business through this process where we talk with everyone. We do sometimes my team does all the interviewing. So we interview the staff, the employee, and their clients, my clients' clients, to find insights, to find out what's not working. And this is a process that like you really have to be trained in order to do this. Otherwise, you just show up to the meeting and you're like, what could be better? How do we improve things? And you're not going to get a real answer, because the client that's trying to give you an answer, they don't even know. They don't even know the answer. So you need to have like a researcher mindset, like looking at almost like a detective. Like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. What's really going on here, And through that process, we find out a lot of things that surprises the business owner and the team. Maybe not so much the team, but the business owner definitely, because they're aware of all of these issues and they thought that things were going well. I think it's almost like, when somebody's going to get a divorce and the other person's like, I thought things were going well. You know what I mean? And they just didn't have the awareness. And so the first thing that we do is we're digging for the insights. And what we're trying to find is like, what's the problem? What's a problem that no one else is solving, or no one's solving well? And what is your genius? What is my client's genius? Then we match that together. Sometimes it's a this thing that they're not even aware of, that this is their genius, because it became what we call an unconscious competency. So they've been so good at this thing, they didn't even think that it was valuable. And so we dig for these things and we match it together to come up with an offer, a solution that you can sell that will be appreciated by your ideal clients. And yeah, that's to explain and not to go deeper than this. That's what I do. And then along the way, I work with clients for multiple years usually. And because we're not doing a small thing here, we're not doing quick fixes, right? So I want to see my client's business, like the whole team, have an innovator mindset. I don't want to be going in and doing all the innovation, right? That's not sustainable. They have to have this DNA in their culture in order for it to be sustainable, because we're not innovating just this time and then we're going to stick with it forever, right? It's a continuous process. You have to be innovating every single thing in your business, from process to people to offers to everything, how you deliver your service. So it's something that you have. It's like you don't go to the fitness for 2 times and then quit, right? You have to keep going, keep doing this. And so yeah, throughout the journey, then we start working with the psychology, the mindset, the self-identity, who do you really want to become? What's the impact? What's your vision for yourself? And then that links with the vision for your business as well. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so it is the very interesting process that you described. I think that those interviews and finding out what is the problem, it is very interesting for me, because I have this researcher mindset, and I totally agree with you that people don't tell you the truth. They don't answer immediately. You ask, what is the problem? No, everything is fine, and then you start asking all of those deeper questions, like why, what for, how, and going deeper and deeper, and suddenly you realize that everything is not okay, and there are many things to improve. So, but I think that it is great that you're doing this kind of 360 research to understand what is the problem, what is actually the problem, because sometimes what we see is not the problem, but something else is the problem that is causing it. But you said that later on you're looking for this innovation, you're looking for this new product. What is the process? How do you usually come up, or how do your clients come up with something new, with an innovation, something that did not exist before? And you also mentioned this identity, like changing identity or reinventing the identity. That is it also part of this process?
Yeah, well, it goes together, right? It's almost like the DNA of the business owner and the employee, the team, and the business. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing, because you're in your business, and the team is in the business. So literally, that's like you are the business, right? So let's start with like innovating the solution or coming up with a new solution. It's a process, right? So we do lots of workshopping, we do lots of brainstorming, we do lots of exercises to come up with like silly ideas and things that you would never kind of think about. And that we do after we gather a lot of information, and we try to make sense of that information that we've gathered from the clients. So we do current clients, we do past clients that aren't your clients anymore, we do ideal clients that you haven't been able to get to work with you, and we're like looking through like a detective. We're like the CSI for the businesses. So like looking into these things and trying to find insights in this data, right? And what we're looking for is like, what is the real struggle? How can we make the life of our clients, like my clients, better, easier, more successful, more convenient, like all these things. And usually it's not something that they've been thinking about, because what we usually do when we get into business is we just look at what people are doing in the industry. We just copy it. That's just normal. Everybody does that, right? But then that's not really sustainable, because everybody's doing the same thing. So you either decrease your price, you either spend more on advertising. It becomes this red ocean strategy, right? Which is nobody really wants to be in that market doing that. So what we want to do is the blue ocean strategy, where we differentiate ourselves. We don't need to compete with other people. And we have this amazing solution where everybody has to come to us if they have this problem. And we do lots of things. And so Yes, I don't know whether that's an answer for your question, but it is this process where we do a lot of exercises and brainstorming. And on my side, because our strength is ideation, we will come up with all these kind of like, we contribute a lot of ideas for our clients, but then they also have input as well. And we work with that. And it's a kind of like, I don't want to say, it's sort of like when kids are having fun and it's messy, you know, like painting all over the place and like scribble. And yeah, so it's kind of like gives you that kind of feeling when you're working with this. There's like no rules. Anybody can think of any silly solution, come up with all sorts of ideas. And that's kind of how you run an innovation kind of workshop, right? Where everybody's like acting like kids and we're thinking out of the box. And that's, yeah, it's this whole process until we come up with a few solutions. Then of course we have to test it out, whether it works or not. Do we need to make edits to it and adapt? And yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely an exciting process, but in the end you have to find this new idea what your clients are actually going for. I think that it is sometimes quite challenging, because thinking in terms of, for example, my niche, I'm a communication coach, and sometimes I'm thinking like, do I even have a niche? Like, maybe people are thinking of me as a certain personality, and I'm sure that I'm attracting certain clients, but I don't think that it is possible to go very narrow in a certain field, to be completely different from others. Do you have such type of clients that are struggling to actually finding this innovation or this very narrow niche?
Yeah, well, the thing is, finding an innovative solution or the best solution is not always about finding a narrow niche. One way to do it is, yes, finding the super niche, but it's not always the case. I have clients that become more general. Actually, I'm also one of that kind of person where like, I'm not just doing innovation, I'm doing coaching as well. I mean, serious coaching. I have background in like psychology, like cognitive behavior therapy, like dialectical behavior therapy, like all sorts of things. So it's almost like when people say, oh, I have this issue, I do that. And this person says, I have this issue, can you help me? I can do that as well. So it's like, but when I look at myself, like, how do I differentiate myself? It's about differentiation. So whether you're building your brand, your personal brand, your self-identity, your business, it's about how do you be, and I always use these words, uncontested, unrivaled, and unforgettable. So how do you become irreplaceable? Not just in business, but in love, in life, in relationships, like everywhere, right? And it's not about like not having people compete with you or you're better or not worse than other people, but it's like, how do you work on yourself so that you have a mix of all these key strengths and things that you love about yourself so that you love who you are and your business as well. So that's kind of like how I differentiate my business. And the methodology that I use to work with my client is different, right? Like I don't know, I've never heard of anyone that kind of does what I do. And so it's not really about, I'm going to work with only this small group of people. It's not just that. It's really about understanding what people are looking for and creating that thing that people aren't even aware that they need. Like, you know, when they created the iPhone and the iPad, nobody knew that they needed an iPhone and iPad, right? And that's why I think the key to marketing, the foundation of marketing really is differentiation. And in order to differentiate, you're not differentiating just for the sake of being different, but you need to be different in an important way, in a way that your clients need this, right? And so, yeah, they're all different pieces that we look for. It's like, what is your genius? So when we say genius, it includes methodology as well. Sometimes my clients will say like, I've been doing this thing this way, and I'll dig into that information. How do you do it? Tell me in detail, step by step, like in very detailed. Walk me through it. How do you do it? And oftentimes when I listen to that, I'll hear bits and pieces of information that, oh my God, I've never heard anybody tell me that, like that they do this thing this way. This is the first time I've heard it. And they'll go like, oh, really? I've just always been doing it this way. I never knew that it was special. You know what I mean? And so it's looking for these things and looking for maybe special things that they could do, but they're not aware that they should be doing for the client. Sometimes it's about the process, it's about the offer, it's about so many things. That's why I say like innovation is with everything in the business. And so to answer your question, it's not always about finding a narrow niche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It is also about how do you communicate your brand and how do you position yourself and what do you say about your methodology. And as you were speaking, I just thought about the event that I attended last week. So last week I was in Tallinn, Estonia at Mindvalley University event, and there were a lot of lectures on communication. And I had my own workshop. I gave a speech on speaking with impact, my topic, what I do. And I attended all of those big speeches and workshops, amazing speakers from all over the world. And no one told something that I told at my workshop. So I was learning from them as well, although they did not share anything new because this is my topic, but I was very interested to see that they have completely different perspective. And I did my speech, and after my speech, my people who I influenced came up to me and said, wow, thank you very much. It was amazing. You changed my life. But I'm sure that my workshop influenced them, but maybe another workshop influenced someone else. So exactly as you say, we need to find our people and we need to kind of attract and communicate. Do you have any advice on communication strategies on how can we communicate our brands, our personal brands or our business brands to attract our ideal customers?
Yeah, well, if there's so many things, right? But if I could talk about one thing, because we don't have forever for this podcast episode, right? But we talk about the unique point of view. So this is when I work with clients, we're looking for this. It's the POV, the point of view that's different from other people, that differentiates you from how other people think, how they do things, how they perceive things, how they look at things, like just basically everything, right? How are you, like, what's the message? What's the different message that you want to put out there that's related to the core of your business and how you differentiate your business? And so when we find that, say, for example, for me, it's differentiation, right? It's about how do you become uncontested, unrivaled, and unforgettable. So that's like my key message, right? I'll use that in everything, in articles that I write for Forbes, for Entrepreneur, for different magazines. I'll always kind of repeat those words, like how do you become irreplaceable, not just in business, but in life, in relationships, like all these kind of key messages that, okay, this is not what the mainstream market is talking about, right? And when you have this unique point of view, then you kind of branch out different kind of mini ideas from that main idea, almost doing like a mind map. And then you might have like 5 to 10 things. Then you talk about these 5 to 10 things. It could be your core pillars, the things that you talk about often. And then there's so many ideas that are related to those ideas, right? But everything fits to the same thing. It's about the same thing. It's about how do you become uncontested, unrivaled, and unforgettable? How do you become irreplaceable? And so you get obsessed with this because basically it's what you do well. Of course, you're going to be obsessed with this thing. And you keep talking about it, right? Now, this is the struggle that people have. Oh, but I don't know whether I want to talk about this. This is not what everybody else is talking about. Like people are talking about this other thing here and seems to get traction. It's going viral. It's like, then you have this social pressure to create a viral video or a content that the society will kind of pick up, and like, oh, it's easy to consume. And that's how something goes viral, because it's easy to consume. The majority of people understand it, right? But for me, like, because I help clients become, the top 1 to 3 or 5% of their niche or their market or the industry that they're in. So my focus is not about being mainstream. It's not creating like a viral that millions of people will see, right? It's really about doing your best work and then charging a really premium price for this amazing work that you do. That is like, it's totally worth the money that your clients are paying. And so it's like going against the stream. And so it's really about the mindset. You really have to come from a place where like, okay, what's missing here? Like, how do I create something that nobody else is thinking about? What's the point of view that will add value to this world? Almost like when you were sharing about the TEDx talks, right? I think that we talked about that before we started recording. It's kind of like that, right? It's like you want to do something that's adding value. You don't want to create just another copy of what somebody else is doing already, even if you do it a little bit better or a lot better. But really the key, I think, is just differentiating your business, your offer, yourself in a way that is authentic to yourself, of course.
Yeah, that's why TED Talks are so popular, because every TED Talk is a new idea. So the idea that people did not hear before. And I think that the same with brands and the same with businesses, with personal brands, what we see online when we're looking at new ads, we don't want to see the same thing that we already heard. We want to see something new. So definitely this is a good analogy. So Nida, I wanted to ask you also about your book. I know that you're a book author and you have a beautiful book cover. So please show us to people who are listening on YouTube, show us the book, 1 to Millions Entrepreneur. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, what it is about? Maybe give us a couple of, snippets and ideas from the book.
Yeah, so the tagline we have here on the book it says building brands that need no introduction. So it's about what we've been talking about, but the book it talks about creating this like offer, but it doesn't go in. It's more like inspirational why book. Like why would you want to do this? Why would you want to be this 1 to millions entrepreneur? It's not about the money. 1 to millions means one person making impact with millions of people. And some people, like some of my clients are coaches, so they'll say like, I don't make an impact on millions of people, but you coach like what, 10 CEOs of these large companies. So you are making a ripple effect. You are making impact on millions of people, like many more people than you think, because your CEOs that you've helped transform, they're going to change the lives of so many people in the company, right? So the book is written for coaches, consultants, experts, practitioners, or even if you have like a digital agency, anything that's service-based, expertise, you use your expertise, you sell your expertise. And it talks a lot about not selling yourself short and creating an offer and selling it for what you're worth and what you deserve. And yeah, that's what the book is about.
Yeah, wow, it's really interesting. It would be interesting to read more about your methodology, what you do. So we will definitely put the link to your book under our episode so that our listeners can learn more about what you do.
So this book doesn't talk about the innovative offers, but I do have an ebook coming out called Outlier Offers. So that one's for free, and people can just subscribe for that on my website. And as soon as it's ready, we'll send it to your inbox.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah. So as soon as you have the link, share it, and we will also share it under the episode in the show notes so that everyone can upload your ebook. And thank you very much for offering that. So Nida, let's sum up. Thank you so much for being on Ideas and Leaders. If you could just give our listeners final message, couple of sentences based on what we discussed, what would it be?
Well, I would say if you're walking away from this conversation with one thing, I think it's really about thinking about your business and how you're different. it sounds like simple, but I know it's not simple. It's a question that you really have to contemplate about. It requires a lot of brain energy, introspection, and that's why most people don't want to do it. Most people don't want to think about it, right? It's easier to copy. It's easier to just conform. It's in human nature to conform. We have a lot of research to confirm this, right? But really in business, to be successful long-term, even in life, just as a person, it's really about how do you evolve? How do you grow? And you really want to get closer to who you want to become. And that requires work. That requires a lot of work. And if we're relating to this, where we're talking about this conversation that we just had, it's really about thinking about how are you different and how do you want to be different? If you're thinking about making an impact in this world, like, what are you doing differently to add value to this world through your business, through how you show up every single day? Yeah, I think that's a question and a conversation worth having with yourself.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for leaving us with this question. I think that this is something that we all need to think about, instead of, how can I copy all of those people who are doing great things? What can I do differently, and what can I add to business? Thank you so much, Nida. Thank you for being on Ideas and Leaders. It was an amazing conversation. And to our listeners, I'm encouraging you to connect with Nida. Where can our listeners connect with you? On social media, website?
Yeah, well, the place to go would be my website, NidaLeardprasopsuk. That's also where you can sign up for the free ebook that's coming out. And LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. I'm not active there, but you can reach me anywhere. And also my email, anita@nidaleard.com. You can email me. I answer all the emails.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nida. Thank you for being on Ideas and Leaders. And yes, to our listeners, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.